History is not only shaped by victories, but by mistakes that spiraled out of control. From wrong words to wrong turns, even the smallest errors have rewritten the fate of nations. A single insult once unleashed Genghis Khan's wrath, wiping an empire off the map. A careless decision on D-Day delayed Germany's response and changed World War II forever. Sometimes a leader's misplaced trust destroyed their own spy network in one stroke. Other times, a farmer's war on sparrows helped trigger one of the deadliest famines in history. Science, too, was not immune. One man's invention of leaded fuel poisoned generations. And once a driver's wrong turn led to the assassination that ignited World War I. Each mistake was small in the moment, but catastrophic in its echoes. In this journey, we'll uncover 12 of the most disastrous errors in human history. Diplomatic disasters, military miscalculations, political blunders, scientific missteps, and fatal accidents. Every one of them a reminder that human error can be more powerful than human genius. This is every historical mistake explained. One of the most destructive military campaigns in human history started for a seemingly useless reason. In the early 1200s, Genghis Khan, leader of the Mongols, was technically at peace with the Khwarazmian Empire. The two powers had even fought against shared enemies, maintaining a fragile balance. But everything changed when a Mongol trade caravan entered Khwarazmian territory. A local governor attacked the caravan, stealing the goods and killing the merchants. Instead of declaring war immediately, Genghis Khan sought justice. He sent ambassadors to the Shah of Khwarazm to demand punishment for the governor. But the Shah made a disastrous decision. He executed one of the Mongol envoys and sent his severed head back with the others. In Mongol culture, harming a messenger was more than an insult. It was an unmistakable act of war. Genghis Khan responded with fury and precision. His armies swept into Khwarazmian lands, destroying entire cities. They dismantled the Khwarazmian Empire, completely erasing it from the map. Even the lowest estimates suggest that millions of people died. But the invasion did not stop there. The Mongols continued westward, devastating Persia, parts of the Middle East, and even reaching Europe. Historians often ask, what if the Shah had simply apologized? What if he had punished the reckless governor instead of insulting the Mongols? At the time, Genghis Khan was already engaged in a war in China. A single rash decision in Khwarazm turned his attention west, changing the fate of entire civilizations. The murder of an envoy had triggered one of the bloodiest campaigns in history. On its first mission in March 1941, the German submarine U-110 damaged two Allied ships but was forced to stop after a gun accident injured crew members. Its second mission in April and May 1941 would prove far more significant. U-110 sank several Allied ships in the North Atlantic before being chased by British warships. On May 9, 1941, British depth charges forced the U-boat to surface. This event became part of a secret operation later known as Operation Primrose. Surrounded by British destroyers, the German submarine was left heavily damaged. At first, the British believed the Germans would fight back and opened fire. They stopped when it became clear the German crew was surrendering. The commander, Fritz Julius Lemp, tried to return to the submarine to destroy secret equipment. He disappeared into the sea, and no one knows exactly how he died. Meanwhile, British sailors boarded the U-110. Inside, they discovered the Enigma machine, the encryption device used by Nazi Germany. They also found vital codebooks that revealed backup ciphers. These materials gave British codebreakers at Bletchley Park a huge advantage. It allowed them to read German naval messages and track U-boat movements. To keep this breakthrough secret, the British let the U-110 sink afterward. They pretended it had gone down with everything still inside. This deception ensured the Germans never suspected their codes were broken. The capture of U-110 became one of the most important intelligence victories of World War II. It helped turn the tide in the Battle of the Atlantic. In 774, Byzantine Emperor Constantine V launched a military campaign against Bulgaria, but it failed. However, he gained a major advantage afterward. Spies inside the Bulgarian court in Pliska were secretly giving him valuable information. The Bulgarian ruler Telerig began to notice that Constantine always seemed to know his plans. He eventually realized that his government had been infiltrated by Byzantine spies. Telerig came up with a clever plan to expose them. He sent a message to Constantine, pretending he wanted to defect to Constantinople. In the letter, he said he wished to join the emperor and become an ally. To gain trust, he asked for the names of the emperor's agents in Bulgaria. He claimed he needed them to make sure they stayed safe while he escaped. Constantine believed him and replied with the list of spies. The sealed scroll traveled back to Telerig's palace. Once he got the names, Telerig revealed his true intentions. He ordered the capture of all the identified Byzantine spies. Guards dragged them out of the palace and into the courtyard. One by one, the spies were executed. In a single move, Constantine's spy network in Bulgaria was destroyed. The emperor was left blind to Bulgarian politics and military plans. Telerig's deception became a famous story of clever statecraft. It showed how trust once misplaced can collapse an empire's strategy. In 1989, East Germany's government faced growing protests demanding freedom. The Berlin Wall had divided families and friends for 28 years. Travel to the west was strictly controlled and nearly impossible. On November 9, 1989, a press conference was scheduled in East Berlin. Günter Schabowski, a senior party spokesman, shuffled his notes nervously. The government had quietly discussed easing travel rules but not yet announced them. During the conference, a reporter asked when the new rules would take effect. Searching his papers, Schabowski hesitated. Then he gave a fateful answer, "As far as I know, immediately." The journalists were stunned by his words. News spread rapidly across East Berlin. Crowds rushed toward the Berlin Wall checkpoints. Border guards were confused and unsure of what to do. They had no orders but had also heard the press conference. As pressure mounted, the guards opened the gates. Thousands of East Berliners poured through, embracing friends and family. People climbed the wall, cheering and celebrating together. By 11:30 p.m., the border crossings were wide open. The fall of the Berlin Wall marked the end of an era. A single sentence had triggered one of history's most dramatic events. In the late 1950s, Mao Zedong launched the Great Leap Forward in China. One of its first major efforts was called the Four Pests Campaign. The goal was to eliminate rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows. Sparrows were blamed for eating grain that humans needed. Propaganda posters showed children and workers attacking the birds. People were told that every sparrow killed was a victory for the nation. Across China, nests were torn down and eggs smashed. Children banged pots and pans to keep sparrows from landing. Exhausted, the birds eventually fell from the sky in massive numbers. Entire communities joined in, determined to wipe out the sparrow population. But the campaign created a dangerous ecological imbalance. Without sparrows, insects like locusts multiplied rapidly. Swarms of pests destroyed crops across the countryside. Food shortages grew worse, adding to the crisis already caused by bad policies. By 1960, tens of millions of people were suffering from famine. The government quietly ended the war on sparrows. Officials replaced sparrows with bedbugs as the new target. But the damage was already done, and millions had died. Historians now see the campaign as one of Mao's greatest mistakes. It remains a warning of what happens when ideology ignores ecology. In 1921, American engineer Thomas Midgley Jr. discovered that adding tetraethyl lead to gasoline reduced engine knocking. The chemical became known as leaded gasoline. Early factory workers exposed to it suffered hallucinations, illness, and even death. Still, car companies promoted it as a miracle solution. Propaganda ads showed happy drivers and clean cars, hiding the dangers. Leaded gasoline spread worldwide, poisoning air and people for decades. In the late 1920s, Midgley also invented Freon, the first chlorofluorocarbon. Freon was marketed as a safe refrigerant for fridges and air conditioners. It soon spread into aerosol sprays and inhalers. For decades, people believed these inventions made life safer and easier. But later scientists discovered that CFCs destroyed the ozone layer. The ozone shield protects Earth from harmful ultraviolet radiation. Satellite data in the 1980s revealed a massive ozone hole over Antarctica. This discovery led to global bans on CFCs. Environmentalists called Midgley's impact one of the worst in history. He was described as a man who had more impact on the atmosphere than any other single human being. Ironically, in 1944, Midgley was paralyzed by polio. He designed a system of ropes and pulleys to help him move in bed. Tragically, he became entangled in the device and strangled to death. His story remains a cautionary tale of unintended consequences. It was the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962. The United States and the Soviet Union were on the brink of nuclear war. At a U.S. Air Force base in Duluth, Minnesota, a guard spotted a shadowy figure climbing the fence. Fearing Soviet sabotage, he fired his weapon and triggered the sabotage alarm. The alarm system automatically alerted nearby bases. At Volkfield, Wisconsin, a wiring error caused the wrong siren to go off. Instead of a sabotage alert, the base siren ordered nuclear-armed fighter jets to take off. Pilots scrambled to their jets, believing World War III had begun. They were at DEFCON 3, a high alert level, just below full nuclear war. At that level, no practice drills were allowed, so the pilots thought it was real. The jets began taxiing toward the runway, preparing for launch. An officer in a jeep raced onto the tarmac, waving frantically to stop them. He managed to signal the pilots just in time, preventing takeoff. Only later did they discover the intruder was not a Soviet spy. It was a black bear climbing the perimeter fence. The bear had accidentally triggered the closest call to nuclear war in history. The event showed how a small mistake could have ended the world. Military planners later reviewed the alarm system to prevent another error. The Cuban Missile Crisis ended peacefully days later, but the Bear incident was kept secret. Today, it is remembered as one of history's strangest near misses with nuclear annihilation. In 1452, a Hungarian engineer named Orban approached the Byzantine Emperor Constantine XI. He offered to build powerful cannons to defend Constantinople from Ottoman attack. The Byzantine treasury was nearly empty after years of decline. Constantine XI could not pay Orban the money or resources he requested. Feeling rejected, Orban turned to the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II. Mehmed welcomed him and gave him full funding and support. Within 3 months, Orban constructed the largest cannon of its age. The massive bombard was called the Basilic. It was so huge that it took 60 oxen to move it and hundreds of men to operate. The cannon could fire stone balls weighing over half a ton. In April 1453, Mehmed began his siege of Constantinople. The basilic was positioned before the city's famous Theodosian walls. Each shot shook the ground and smashed huge chunks of masonry. The Byzantines tried to repair the walls with wood, earth, and rubble, but the bombard kept pounding day after day. After nearly 2 months, the walls were breached. Ottoman troops poured into the city through the broken defences. On May 29, 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottomans. The 1,000-year-old Byzantine Empire came to an end. Orban's cannon had helped change the course of world history. Kim Jong-Nam was the eldest son of North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. For years, he was considered the likely heir to the regime. In the late 1990s, he held senior positions in the Ministry of Public Security. He also worked on developing North Korea's early IT systems. But in 2001, everything changed because of a trip to Tokyo Disneyland. Jong-Nam was caught in Japan using a fake Dominican Republic passport. Japanese authorities detained him, creating an international scandal. The news embarrassed his father Kim Jong-il on the global stage. Kim Jong-il cancelled the planned state visit to China because of the incident. Afterward, Jong-Nam began losing his influence in Pyongyang. He lived mostly in exile, moving between China, Macau, and Southeast Asia. Reporters sometimes found him giving interviews about reforms and openness. He was known for enjoying a more luxurious and open lifestyle than the Kim family tradition. Intelligence agencies suspected he had connections with China. Some even believed he may have cooperated with the CIA. When Kim Jong-un was chosen as successor in 2010, Jong-Nam became a rival. According to South Korean intelligence, Kim Jong-un issued a standing order for his assassination. Jong-Nam survived several attempts on his life. But on February 13, 2017, he was killed at Kuala Lumpur airport with VX nerve agent. His assassination shocked the world and symbolized the ruthless nature of North Korean politics. Publius Quinctilius Varus was a Roman governor in charge of Germania in 9 AD. He commanded 3 Roman legions, around 20,000 soldiers. Among his officers was Arminius, a Germanic noble trained in Rome. Arminius had served in the Roman army and gained Varus's trust. But secretly, Arminius was plotting to unite the Germanic tribes against Rome. That summer, Arminius told Varus of a small rebellion nearby. Varus believed him and led his legions into the dense Teutoburg Forest. The Romans marched in long columns slowed by rain and mud. Their tight formations collapsed as the terrain closed in around them. Suddenly, Germanic warriors launched an ambush from the trees. Arrows and spears rained down on the Romans. The legionnaires fought bravely, but they were trapped in narrow terrain. For 3 days, the Romans were harassed, starved, and cut down. Their cavalry could not maneuver in the forest. Supplies dwindled and morale collapsed. At the climax, Arminius revealed his betrayal openly. The Germanic tribes overwhelmed the Roman lines. Varus fell on his sword to avoid capture. Nearly the entire Roman force was annihilated. The disaster ended Rome's plans to conquer Germania beyond the Rhine. In the months before D-Day, German commanders argued over where the Allies would land. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt believed the invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais. Calais was the closest point between Britain and France with key ports. Erwin Rommel, commander of coastal defences, also focused on Calais. But Rommel warned that Normandy was also a possible invasion site. Hitler, however, could not make a clear decision. He split Germany's armoured divisions between Calais and other areas. This left tanks too far inland to react quickly on the coast. Meanwhile, the Allies prepared Operation Fortitude, a massive deception campaign. Fake radio traffic and inflatable tanks tricked the Germans. German intelligence became convinced Calais was the real target. On June 6, 1944, the Allies landed in Normandy instead. At first, German officers thought the Normandy landings were only a diversion. Hitler delayed moving reinforcements, expecting the real attack at Calais. Allied air power bombed German supply lines, slowing any response. Rommel was away visiting his wife when the landings began. Other officers were also absent, thinking bad weather would prevent an invasion. By the time counterattacks were ordered, it was too late. The Allies had secured 5 beachheads and over 150,000 troops. Germany lost its chance to stop the invasion, sealing the fate of the war in the West. In 1867, the Russian Empire sold Alaska to the United States. The price was $7.2 million, about 2 cents per acre. Russia had just lost the Crimean War and feared losing Alaska in another conflict. Britain, with strong forces in nearby Canada, was seen as the main threat. To prevent this, Russia offered Alaska to the United States instead. The deal was negotiated by U.S. Secretary of State William H. Seward. Many Americans mocked the purchase, calling it Seward's Folly. Newspapers described Alaska as a frozen wasteland with no value. Critics said it was just a giant block of ice. But Alaska turned out to be more than twice the size of Texas. It gave the U.S. vast territory on the Pacific coast. The land was rich with natural resources like oil, gold, and timber. It also offered strategic access to Asia across the Pacific. Over time, Alaska proved essential for America's economic and military power. During World War II, Alaska became a key base against Japan. In the Cold War, it became a front line against the Soviet Union. Today, Alaska is famous for its vast wilderness and energy resources. The nickname Seward's Folly slowly turned into Seward's Vision. What was once mocked became one of the smartest purchases in U.S. history. The Alaska sale shows how short-term doubts can hide long-term value. When Alexander the Great died in 323 BC, he left behind the largest empire the world had ever seen. But he left no clear successor to rule it. His only direct heir was an unborn child. His half-brother Aridaeus suffered from serious mental disabilities. Without a stable plan, Alexander's top generals rushed to claim power. These generals were called the diadochi, or successors. At first, they tried to share power under a regency, but suspicion and ambition quickly broke the alliance. Civil wars erupted across the empire. The Wars of the Diadochi lasted nearly 50 years. Former allies betrayed each other for territory. Massive battles shattered cities from Greece to India. Members of Alexander's royal family were systematically murdered. His son, Alexander IV, was killed before reaching adulthood. By 281 BC, the empire had split into several rival kingdoms. The most powerful were Egypt under the Ptolemies and Asia under the Seleucids. Macedonia itself became a battlefield among competing claimants. Alexander's dream of a united empire connecting East and West died with him. Instead, centuries of regional conflict followed. The Wars of Succession helped pave the way for the rise of Rome. Christopher Columbus's discovery of the Americas happened because of a major mistake. At the time, many scholars already had a good idea of Earth's true size. Thinkers like Eratosthenes had measured it fairly accurately. But Columbus rejected those estimates. He believed Earth was much smaller than it really is. He also thought Asia stretched much farther east than it does. Based on this wrong math, he argued Japan could be reached by sailing west in just weeks. Most experts disagreed and believed the trip would be far too long. Still, Spain funded his voyage, impressed by his confidence. Ironically, if he had used the correct numbers, he might never have set sail. Instead, he stumbled onto the Americas, continents no Europeans expected. His miscalculation accidentally changed world history. The Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919 after World War I. It placed very tough conditions on Germany that shaped the country's future. The treaty forced Germany to take full blame for the war. It also required them to give up land and shrink their military. Germany had to pay huge amounts of money to the Allied powers. Many Germans saw these demands as unfair and humiliating. They had expected peace talks to follow Wilson's 14 points. Economist John Maynard Keynes warned the treaty would damage Europe. Millions of Germans were left outside Germany's new borders. The loss of land and strength fueled anger and nationalism. This frustration later helped Adolf Hitler rise to power. While not the only cause, the treaty played a big role in World War II. The Maginot Line was a massive system of defences built by France after World War I. Its goal was to slow down a German attack and keep battles away from French land. Construction began in the 1930s as Germany grew stronger. France could not rely on Britain or the United States for quick help. With fewer young men after World War I, France chose a defensive plan. The Maginot Line stretched from Switzerland to Luxembourg. It had underground bunkers, heavy artillery and thick fortifications. But it did not cover the Ardennes forest or the Belgian border well. In 1940, Germany bypassed the line by invading through Belgium and the Ardennes. The sections of the line that were attacked mostly held firm, but the German strategy made the defences useless. After the war, people argued whether the Maginot Line was a smart idea or a failure. Operation Barbarossa was Nazi Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941. It was supposed to be a quick victory within weeks. At first, German forces made huge advances. Hundreds of thousands of Soviet troops were captured in encirclements. By late 1941, German armies were near Leningrad and Moscow. But supply lines grew too long and the cold winter set in. Soviet resistance was stronger than expected. The siege of Leningrad killed over 1 million civilians, mostly from starvation. At Moscow, fresh Siberian troops pushed the Germans back. By the end of 1941, Germany had lost over 100,000 soldiers. The failure forced Hitler to take direct control, worsening mistakes. Operation Barbarossa turned into the largest and deadliest front of World War II. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand visited Sarajevo. Earlier that day, assassins failed to kill him with a bomb. His drivers were told to change the route for safety, but the message never reached them. By mistake, the car turned onto a side street. There stood Gavrilo Princip, one of the conspirators. Princip had stopped to buy food after the failed bombing. The car stalled right in front of him. Princip fired, killing Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie. That wrong turn triggered the chain reaction that led to World War I. History shows us that the greatest turning points are often born from mistakes. From insults that unleashed Mongol invasions to a sandwich break that sparked a world war. From failed defenses like the Maginot Line to technological solutions that poisoned the planet. Each disaster began not with fate, but with a choice often small, sometimes careless. These stories are warnings etched in blood and stone that power, pride, and error can reshape the world. If you found this journey through history's greatest mistakes fascinating, there are many more waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe now and join us as we continue to explore the errors, miscalculations, and accidents that shaped the course of humanity.